3 police officers walked into my anniversary gala while my husband was still holding a champagne glass and smiling at me like he loved me. 20 seconds later, one of them placed him in handcuffs in front of 200 guests, and the woman screaming loudest in the ballroom wasn't his mistress. It was my younger sister begging me not to ruin her life too. If you had asked me a year ago who I trusted most in this world, I would have said Ethan first, Madison second, and myself somewhere very far beneath them. That was my first mistake. My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 35 years old, and until recently I honestly believed I had survived the hardest part of my life already. 2 years ago, I nearly died driving home from a client presentation in Seattle. I still remember the rain that night because it sounded violent against the windshield, like handfuls of gravel thrown by invisible hands. I remember reaching for my phone at a red light to call Ethan and tell him I'd finally landed the downtown redevelopment contract we had been praying for. Then I remember the brakes failing halfway down Mercer Street. The car didn't stop. It just kept accelerating downhill while headlights blurred around me and people started screaming outside. I hit the divider hard enough to fracture 3 ribs and collapse my left lung. The doctors later told me I was lucky to be alive. Funny word, lucky. People use it when they don't know what else to say to someone who came close to dying. Recovery destroyed me more than the accident itself. Before that night, I had been the type of woman who scheduled every hour of her day. I ran my own architecture firm. I traveled constantly. I thrived under pressure. After the accident, I couldn't even sit in the passenger seat without gripping the door handle hard enough to bruise my fingers. Loud noises made me jump. Rainstorms made me physically sick. I stopped sleeping properly. Sometimes Ethan would wake up at 3 in the morning because I was crying beside him without realizing it. That was when everyone started calling him the perfect husband. And honestly, at the time, he deserved it. Ethan handled everything while I fell apart. Insurance paperwork. Physical therapy appointments. Medication schedules. Grocery shopping. He even started cooking dinner every night because I kept forgetting to eat. People looked at him with admiration, the kind reserved for men who stay when life gets ugly. My younger sister Madison especially adored him for it. She used to tell people, if I ever get married, I hope I find someone half as loyal as Ethan. I used to smile whenever she said that. Madison and I had always been close in the strange complicated way sisters sometimes are. She was 6 years younger than me and grew up in my shadow a little. At least that's what my mother used to say. I was the responsible daughter. Madison was the charming one. I built careers and routines while Madison drifted between jobs, relationships, apartments, and emotional crises. Somehow people always forgave her for it because she had this warmth that made everyone feel protective. She cried easily. Laughed loudly. Hugged people constantly. Even when we were children, she could break something expensive and somehow convince you to apologize for making her feel bad about it. After my accident, she practically moved into our lives. At first, it felt comforting. Ethan worked from home most days, but Madison started coming over with coffee and groceries whenever he had meetings. Sometimes she cleaned the kitchen while I slept upstairs. Other times she sat beside me on the couch while we watched old reality shows together under blankets. She brushed my hair once when I was too exhausted to move my arm properly after physical therapy. I remember crying because the pain medication made me emotional, and Madison kissed my forehead and whispered, "You're still my big sister. You're going to be okay." God. I replay that memory differently now. About 8 months after the accident, my anxiety became severe enough that my doctor recommended reducing my workload temporarily. Ethan supported the idea immediately. Too immediately, looking back. He told me I needed rest, stability, less stress. Madison agreed with him constantly. They became a team whenever the subject involved my mental health. "You're pushing yourself too hard. You need more support. You don't seem like yourself lately." At the time, I thought they were helping me. Now I realize they were slowly teaching me not to trust my own instincts. The first truly strange moment happened almost a year later during a Sunday brunch at our house. Ethan was outside grilling while Madison sat across from me scrolling through her phone. She suddenly laughed under her breath and turned the screen away quickly like she didn't want me seeing something. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. You literally smiled at your phone like a Disney villain." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "It's just an ugly photo of Ethan. Relax." Something about the way she said his name felt weird. Not flirtatious exactly. Familiar. Intimate. Like she'd been thinking about him privately before I entered the conversation. Then Ethan walked inside carrying a plate of food, and without even looking up, Madison reached for his drink before he asked. "Tiny thing, right? But married people notice patterns." She handed him the exact sparkling water he liked with lemon already squeezed inside. He took it automatically. No hesitation. No explanation. Just a smooth unconscious rhythm between them that shouldn't have existed. I remember staring at them for half a second too long because Madison suddenly looked at me and smiled. "What?" I shook my head immediately. "Nothing." That became the theme of the next several months. Nothing. Every weird feeling got buried beneath exhaustion and self-doubt. Ethan staying up late downstairs with Madison while I went to bed early because my medication made me tired. Nothing. Madison showing up wearing one of Ethan's old college sweatshirts because she was cold. Nothing. Them exchanging glances during conversations that stopped the second I noticed. Nothing. Then came the Napa trip. I was supposed to go with them originally. Ethan had planned a weekend vineyard getaway for my birthday with a few friends and family members. 2 days before the trip, I had a panic attack during a work meeting bad enough that I locked myself inside the office bathroom shaking uncontrollably for nearly an hour. Ethan insisted I stay home and rest instead of traveling. "I don't want you forcing yourself," he said gently that night while rubbing my shoulders. "We can always do another trip later." Madison agreed immediately. "Seriously, Liv. You look exhausted." So I stayed home feeling guilty while everyone else went without me. 3 days later, I was scrolling Instagram around midnight when I saw the photo. It was posted by Ethan's cousin Rachel. A group picture from Napa. Everyone smiling outside some expensive winery with mountains behind them. At first nothing seemed unusual. Then I zoomed in. Madison stood beside Ethan with her hand resting against his chest. Not casually either. Comfortably. Possessively. The kind of touch people use without thinking when they've repeated it too many times before. My stomach tightened instantly. I told myself I was imagining things. I almost succeeded too until I noticed the second photo in the post. A candid video clip. Everyone laughing around a dinner table while Rachel's 4-year-old daughter climbed into Ethan's lap. Then the little girl pointed toward Madison and said, "Can I sit with Daddy and Maddie too?" The table went silent for half a second. Not long. Just long enough. Then someone behind the camera laughed awkwardly and the video ended. I watched it 7 times. Daddy and Maddie. Not Uncle Ethan. Daddy. At 1 in the morning, I was still sitting in darkness replaying those 2 words in my head while rain tapped softly against the windows. Something cold started spreading through my chest, not heartbreak exactly, something more confusing than that. Instinct. The terrifying feeling that your brain notices danger before your heart catches up. When Ethan came home the next evening, he kissed me immediately and started telling me funny stories about the trip while unpacking his suitcase. I watched him carefully the entire time. Every movement felt rehearsed somehow. Too smooth. Too normal. Then Madison arrived 20 minutes later carrying leftover wine bottles from the vineyard. And the second she walked inside, Ethan looked at her. That was it. Just a look. Most people would never notice it. But married people know the language of each other's eyes. It lasted less than a second, yet somehow contained an entire private conversation. A warning. A check-in. A shared awareness that I was standing there watching both of them. Madison recovered first. She smiled brightly and hugged me. You would have loved Napa. We missed you so much. Her perfume smelled like my shampoo. I froze. Not similar. The exact same scent. Vanilla jasmine. A custom salon blend I'd used for years because Ethan once told me it reminded him of home. Suddenly I couldn't breathe properly. Because there are only two explanations for why another woman smells exactly like your husband's favorite memory of you. And neither of them ends well. That night I barely slept. Ethan lay beside me snoring softly while my mind kept replaying every strange moment from the past year like puzzle pieces rearranging themselves into something monstrous. Around 3 a.m, I quietly got out of bed to drink water. As I walked past the downstairs office, I noticed light beneath the door. Voices. Low. Whispering. I moved closer without thinking. Madison laughed softly inside the room. Then I heard Ethan say something that made every nerve in my body go numb. She still trusts us completely. Silence. Then Madison answered quietly. For now. The next morning, I woke up beside my husband and realized I was afraid to move. Not because Ethan had touched me or threatened me or said anything cruel to my face. That would have been easier, honestly. Cruelty is simple when it looks like cruelty. What frightened me was that he was sleeping beside me peacefully after I had heard him whisper to my sister that I still trusted them completely. His arm was draped over my waist like nothing had changed. His wedding ring pressed lightly against my skin. For one horrible second, I wondered how many times that same hand had reached for Madison when I wasn't looking. I slipped out of bed slowly and went into the bathroom, turning on the shower so he wouldn't hear me crying. Except I didn't cry. That scared me too. I just stood there staring at myself in the mirror, looking at a woman who had spent 2 years apologizing for being fragile while the two people closest to her may have been using that fragility like a locked door they had the keys to. By breakfast, Ethan was back to being perfect. He made coffee exactly the way I liked it. Madison had supposedly left early, though her car was still parked half a block away when I looked through the upstairs window. Ethan kissed my forehead and asked if I had slept badly. I said I'd had another nightmare. His face softened with the expression everyone loved him for, that patient, wounded tenderness, like my pain hurt him personally. Maybe you should call Dr. Patel again, he said. Your anxiety has been getting worse. There it was. Not concern. A label. A neat little box he could put around anything I noticed. So I acted smaller. I acted tired. I let my hands shake when I picked up the mug because I knew he expected that from me now. And while he watched me with that careful, clinical husband face, I understood something I should have understood much earlier. Ethan didn't just lie. He studied me. For the next week, I became the best actress in my own house. I didn't accuse him. I didn't mention the Napa video. I didn't ask why Madison smelled like my shampoo or why she knew which sparkling water he liked. I smiled when she came over. I thanked her when she folded laundry that wasn't hers. I laughed when she teased me for still being dramatic about rain, even though the comment made Ethan glance at her sharply, like she had almost said too much. Every day, I gave them exactly what they wanted: Olivia, the anxious wife. Olivia, the recovering accident victim. Olivia, the woman too unstable to trust her own mind. But every night after Ethan fell asleep, I searched. At first, I only looked through obvious things. Bank statements. Shared credit card charges. Calendar entries. Nothing screamed betrayal, but small things kept appearing like loose threads. A hotel bar charge on a night Ethan claimed he was helping Madison move furniture. 2 dinners at restaurants I had never been to. A recurring payment to a storage unit downtown. When I asked about one of the charges casually, Ethan didn't even pause. That was for your birthday gift, he said. Don't ruin the surprise. He smiled so warmly I almost hated myself for doubting him. Almost. Then I checked our home office. Ethan had always handled household paperwork after the accident because looking at insurance forms made my chest tighten. That was how he explained it. That was how I allowed it. Inside the filing cabinet, everything looked organized, color-coded, responsible. Exactly like him. But behind a folder labeled medical receipts, I found a thinner folder with my name written across the tab. Inside were photocopies of my driver's license, my passport, my social security card, and 3 bank authorization forms I did not remember signing. My mouth went dry. The signatures looked like mine. Not perfect, but close enough. I sat on the office floor for nearly 10 minutes just staring at the papers while the house hummed quietly around me. Somewhere upstairs, Ethan was taking a work call. His voice sounded normal. Calm. Attractive. The voice of a man people trusted. I took pictures of every page and put the folder back exactly where I found it. Then I noticed one more thing tucked behind the cabinet drawer. A receipt from the storage unit downtown. The customer name listed was mine. I had never rented a storage unit in my life. That evening, Madison came over with Thai food and a bottle of wine. She acted cheerful, but I noticed how comfortable she had become in my kitchen. She didn't ask where the plates were anymore. She opened the correct drawer for napkins. She adjusted the thermostat without thinking. At one point, Ethan came up behind her while she was at the sink and placed his hand lightly on her lower back as he reached past her for a glass. He removed it so quickly that anyone else would have missed it. I didn't. Madison didn't flinch either. She leaned into it for half a second before catching herself. My body went cold, but my face stayed soft. After dinner, Madison wandered upstairs while Ethan cleared plates. I followed a minute later, silent on the carpeted steps. She was in my bedroom. Not the hallway. Not the guest bathroom. My bedroom. She stood in front of my vanity holding one of my earrings against her ear, tilting her head like she was trying on a version of my life. In the mirror, our eyes met. She jumped, then laughed too quickly. Sorry. These are pretty. I always forget how much nicer your things are. My things. Not your earrings. Not your room. My things. I stepped inside and smiled. You can borrow them sometime. Her face lit up with something ugly before she hid it. Really? Sure, I said. We're sisters. She hugged me hard, and over her shoulder I saw the top drawer of my nightstand slightly open. Later, after she left, I checked it. My anxiety medication bottle had been moved. Not stolen. Moved. As if someone had been checking the label. That was when fear shifted into something sharper. The next day, I drove to the storage facility during Ethan's lunch meeting. My hands shook so badly in the parking lot that I had to sit there breathing for 5 minutes before walking inside. The clerk barely looked at me when I showed my ID. Unit 214, she said, handing me a temporary access code. Your husband was just here last week. My husband. Inside the unit, I found boxes stacked neatly against the wall. Some belonged to Madison. I recognized her old college books, winter coats, framed photos. But beside them were things from my house. Extra bedding from our guest room. Kitchenware. 2 lamps from my office. A framed architectural award I thought Ethan had put in the attic because it made me pressure myself too much. Then I saw the garment bags. 3 of them. Inside were dresses from my closet. Expensive dresses. Cocktail dresses. Anniversary dresses. Dresses Madison had complimented over the years with that soft little sigh that always sounded like admiration, but now I understood it had been hunger. At the very back of the unit sat a cardboard box labeled OC documents. My initials. Inside were old tax records, copies of property paperwork, and a printed email thread between Ethan and Madison. I only read the first few lines before my knees weakened. Madison, she'll never agree if we bring it up directly. She still thinks she can go back to full control. Ethan, then we don't bring it up directly. We make it about her health. Madison, exactly. She trusts you when you sound worried. I pressed my hand over my mouth so I wouldn't make a sound, even though I was alone. There were more messages. Too many. They talked about me like a project. Like a problem to manage. Madison suggested I wasn't ready to handle finances. Ethan said he could get me to sign if he framed it as protection after the accident. Madison joked that I was easier when scared. And Ethan, my husband, the man who held me through nightmares, replied, I know. I hate that it works, but it works. That sentence did something to me. Not broke me. Breaking implies falling apart. It emptied me. I photographed everything. Every email. Every document. Every label on every box. Then I locked the unit and drove home in total silence. When I walked into my kitchen that afternoon, Madison was there wearing my cream cardigan. She turned with a smile. Ethan said you'd be out longer. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then she laughed and tugged at the sleeve. Sorry, I spilled coffee on my shirt. Hope you don't mind. I looked at her standing in my house, wearing my clothes, beside my husband's coffee mug, smiling like she already belonged there more than I did. And I finally understood. Madison wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was replacing me. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I opened my laptop and searched the inheritance account my father left me before he died. The password no longer worked. I reset it using backup verification, and when the account finally opened, my vision blurred. 3 withdrawals. All marked as authorized. All signed with my name. Total amount missing, $186,000. From upstairs, Ethan called softly, Liv? Are you coming to bed? I closed the laptop, looked toward the dark hallway, and answered in the calmest voice I had ever heard come out of my own mouth. In a minute. The strange thing about betrayal is that the moment you finally see it clearly, the world does not become louder. It becomes silent. I sat in the dark kitchen with my father's inheritance account open on my laptop, staring at 3 withdrawals that had been made under my name, and all I could hear was the refrigerator humming behind me. Not my heartbeat. Not Ethan moving upstairs. Not the rain tapping against the windows again like some cruel little reminder of the night my life first cracked open. Just that low mechanical hum, steady and indifferent, while I realized my husband and my sister had not only been sleeping together, not only been lying to me, not only been treating my trauma like a convenient weakness. They had been stealing from me. From my father. From the only piece of security he left behind after he died. And somehow, that hurt in a different place. Affairs are ugly. Lies are ugly. But stealing from a dead man's gift to his daughter while pretending to protect her? That is not weakness. That is strategy. I closed the laptop before Ethan came downstairs. He appeared in the hallway a minute later wearing the soft gray t-shirt I used to love on him, his hair messy, his face sleepy, his voice gentle enough to make a stranger trust him. Liv, he said. You okay? I looked at him and almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because the performance was so good. He sounded exactly like the man who had sat beside my hospital bed and told me I never had to handle anything alone again. The same man who had probably already known how useful those words would become. I nodded and told him I had been answering emails. He frowned like a concerned husband. At midnight? That's not good for you. Not good for me. That phrase had become his favorite leash. I apologized, because the old Olivia would have apologized, and followed him upstairs like nothing had changed. But when he fell asleep again, I lay beside him with my eyes open until morning, silently making a promise to myself. I would not confront them until I knew everything. Not part of it. Not enough to scream. Everything. The next morning, I called my firm and told my assistant I would be working from home for a few days. Then I called a divorce attorney. I chose a woman named Maren Knox because her website had no comforting language, no soft promises, no smiling stock photos of peaceful couples signing papers across conference tables. Her profile simply said she specialized in complex asset concealment, financial misconduct, and high-conflict separations. That sounded exactly like the battlefield I had woken up inside. When her office asked whether the matter was urgent, I said, "My husband and my sister may have forged my signature and stolen from my inheritance." The receptionist went quiet for half a second, then gave me an appointment that afternoon. Sitting in Maren's office felt like stepping into a version of adulthood I had avoided since the accident. There was no crying. No soothing. No pity. She listened while I talked, and the more I explained, the more her expression changed from professional patience to something colder. I showed her the photographs from the storage unit, the bank withdrawals, the copied ID documents, the printed emails, the charges, the Napa video, the messages I had found so far. She did not gasp. She did not say, "I'm so sorry," the way everyone else always did when my life became uncomfortable to hear about. She leaned back, folded her hands, and said, "Olivia, this is not just infidelity. This looks like financial exploitation, forgery, and possibly a coordinated effort to establish you as mentally incapable of managing your own affairs." Mentally incapable. The phrase hit me so hard I almost stopped breathing. Maren noticed. "Have they encouraged you to document your anxiety? Therapy records, medication changes, emails about not being able to cope?" I thought of Ethan suggesting Dr. Patel every time I questioned something. Madison telling my mother I had been spiraling again. The way people had started speaking softer around me at family dinners, like I was glass. The way Ethan had taken over bills, contracts, insurance, appointments, even passwords, all under the beautiful excuse of love. "Yes," I said quietly. "For almost 2 years." Maren's jaw tightened. "Then you need to understand something. They may not just be stealing money. They may be building a story around you. A story where you are unstable, confused, dependent, and unreliable. If this goes to court, that story could be used against you unless we dismantle it before they weaponize it." That was the moment the floor dropped out from under me again, because suddenly the affair was no longer the center of the nightmare. I had thought Madison wanted my husband. I had thought Ethan wanted my money. But maybe what they really wanted was to make me disappear from my own life while I was still alive enough to watch it happen. Maren told me not to confront them. She told me to preserve evidence, avoid emotional reactions, stop signing anything, change passwords from a device Ethan could not access, and schedule a medical evaluation with an independent psychiatrist to document my actual competence. She also recommended a forensic accountant and, after a pause, a private investigator. "Not because we need drama," she said. "Because we need timelines." Timelines. I used to build those for projects. Permits, designs, approvals, deadlines. Clean lines showing how one thing led to another. Now I needed one for my own betrayal. The private investigator's name was Nolan Price. He was older, calm, and looked like someone who had spent decades learning that people are usually worse than they claim. I met him in a coffee shop 20 minutes from my house because I could not risk Ethan seeing his office address in my navigation history. Nolan asked fewer questions than I expected. He wanted names, dates, known locations, financial access points, vehicle records, emails, passwords, travel history. When I mentioned the accident, he paused. "Do you think it was connected?" he asked. I wanted to say no immediately. I wanted to protect myself from the horror of even considering it. So I answered honestly. "I don't know." Nolan nodded once. "Then we don't assume. We verify." For the next 2 weeks, I lived 2 lives. In one life, I was still Ethan's fragile wife, Madison's grateful sister, the woman who got tired easily and smiled through confusion. In the other, I was building a case so quietly that neither of them felt the knife moving toward them. Every morning, I made coffee and let Ethan kiss my cheek. Every evening, I texted Madison heart emojis when she asked if I needed anything. In between, I forwarded bank records to Marin, met with the forensic accountant, scanned old paperwork, copied insurance files, and created a timeline so detailed it looked like a murder board without the red string. Then Nolan called. "Your sister has been meeting your husband at least twice a week," he said. "Not always at hotels. Sometimes at the storage unit. Sometimes at a short-term rental under her friend's name." I closed my eyes. Even when you already know, hearing it confirmed is its own injury. "There's more," he continued. "The affair appears to have started earlier than you thought." "How much earlier?" A pause. "During your physical recovery. Within weeks of your discharge." I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my fingers hurt. Weeks. Not months. Not after life got difficult. Not after I had become distant. Weeks after I came home from the hospital unable to shower without help. Weeks after Ethan carried me up the stairs because I couldn't breathe properly. Weeks after Madison sat on my bed and cried about how scared she had been to lose me. "Are you sure?" I asked. I have photos from an old cloud album linked through Madison's secondary email. Some metadata places them together at a hotel outside Tacoma. Date stamped 11 days after your first follow-up appointment. For a moment I couldn't speak. I looked across my office at the framed award Ethan had moved into storage because he said it pressured me. There it was now, back on my wall where I had placed it the day after finding it. Proof that I existed before they shrank me. Proof that I had built something before they started calling my strength instability. Nolan cleared his throat. "There's another issue. I pulled the maintenance records you requested for your car." My entire body went still. "What did you find?" The brake system had been flagged during servicing 3 weeks before the accident. The mechanic recommended immediate repairs. The estimate was emailed to your husband because his contact was listed on the account. I couldn't feel my hands. "Did he open it?" "Yes." The shop confirmed a red receipt from his email. I stared at nothing. Nolan spoke carefully. "That does not mean he caused the accident. It means he knew there was a safety issue before it happened." 3 weeks. Ethan had known for 3 weeks. I remembered that month vividly because I had been working 14-hour days on the Seattle project. I remembered telling him the car felt strange once, maybe twice. I remembered him saying, "It's probably just wet roads. I'll take it in next week." Next week never came. The presentation did. The rain did. The hill did. The divider did. Then Nolan sent me a screenshot of a text exchange recovered from Madison's old tablet backup. It was dated 4 days before my accident. "Madison, don't tell her about the car right now. She'll panic and cancel Seattle. Ethan, it needs fixing. Madison, after the presentation. You know how she gets when she's stressed. Ethan, fine. After." I read the messages until the words stopped looking like language. They had not plotted to hurt me. That would almost have been cleaner, in a sick way. They had simply decided my safety was less important than convenience. Less important than the contract. Less important than not dealing with my reaction. They had gambled with my life because warning me would have made their day harder. That was the first time I threw up from grief. I made it to the bathroom just in time, locked the door, and sat on the tile afterward shaking so violently I had to press my palms flat against the floor. Ethan knocked 10 minutes later. "Liv? Are you sick?" His voice was gentle. Always gentle. I looked at the closed door and saw him differently now. Not as a monster. Monsters are easy to recognize. Ethan was worse because he could stand outside a bathroom asking if I was okay after helping create the pain that put me there. "I'm fine," I said. You don't sound fine. I almost said, neither did the brakes. But I swallowed it. That night, Madison came over with soup. Soup. Like we were in some wholesome family commercial where sisters show up with comfort food and husbands bring blankets. She sat on the edge of my bed and touched my knee. Ethan said you had a rough day, she whispered. You know we're worried about you, right? I looked at her face. Really looked. She had always been pretty in a soft, approachable way. Big eyes. Rounded cheeks. A trembling lower lip she could summon whenever she wanted sympathy. But underneath that softness, there was something starved. Something that had been watching me for years, measuring what I had, waiting for a crack wide enough to crawl through. Do you ever feel like you got tired of being my sister? I asked. She blinked. What? I smiled weakly, like I was embarrassed. Nothing. Medication makes me say weird things. Her face relaxed. There it was again. Relief. She preferred me confused. It made me easier to forgive. After she left, I checked the hallway camera I had secretly installed inside a decorative shelf 3 days earlier. It captured Madison downstairs with Ethan, her arms wrapped around his neck, whispering, "She's getting worse. I told you this would happen." Ethan rubbed his forehead. We just need a little more time. Madison kissed him lightly and said, "Then stop acting guilty. You're terrible at it." I saved the footage. The next major break came from my mother, of all people. She called me one afternoon sounding hesitant, which was unusual because my mother usually entered conversations like a weather system. She asked if Madison had borrowed money from me recently. I kept my voice neutral and asked why. My mother sighed. She told me you were helping her buy a condo because you wanted her closer after everything that happened. I thought it sounded generous, but then your aunt said Madison told her something different. That you were putting assets in her name because Ethan was worried you might make impulsive decisions. There it was. The story spreading outward. Not just between Ethan and Madison. Through the family. Carefully. Quietly. Olivia was unstable. Olivia needed help. Olivia was moving assets because Olivia could not be trusted. I asked my mother to forward me every message Madison had sent about my health, my money, or my marriage. She asked if something was wrong. For 1 second, I almost told her everything. I wanted to crawl back into being someone's daughter, someone protected. But Marin's voice echoed in my head. Do not tip them off. So I said I was just organizing legal documents after the accident. My mother didn't believe me, but she sent the messages anyway. They were worse than I expected. Madison had been planting seeds for months. Liv forgot another appointment. Ethan is exhausted but won't say it. She snapped at me today and didn't remember later. We're all trying to keep her calm. Please don't mention money around her. It triggers her. Every line was small enough to sound caring. Together, they built a cage. When I showed Marin, she said, "This is deliberate." I asked her what happened next. She said, "Now we let them make one more mistake." That mistake came in the form of our 10th anniversary gala. Ethan had suggested canceling it because I wasn't emotionally up for hosting. Madison agreed, obviously. But the gala was not just a party. It was an annual fundraiser connected to my architecture firm's community housing initiative. 200 people would attend. Clients, donors, family, press, old colleagues, friends. Before the accident, it had been my proudest event of the year. After the accident, Ethan slowly took over planning because he said he wanted to reduce my stress. Madison helped with vendor coordination. Of course she did. This year, I insisted we keep it. Ethan looked surprised. Madison looked scared for exactly half a second before smiling. Are you sure, Liv? She asked. That's a lot. I placed my hand over hers and said, I think it might be good for me. She squeezed back. Then I'll help you through it. I almost admired the audacity. Over the next month, everything accelerated. Ethan became more affectionate, probably because he sensed me pulling away but couldn't identify why. Madison became bolder. She started correcting staff at my house like she lived there. She chose floral arrangements for the gala without asking me. She changed the seating chart and placed herself beside Ethan at the main table until I quietly changed it back. When she noticed, she pouted. "I thought you'd want me close in case you got overwhelmed." I looked at her and said, "I'll manage." She didn't like that. Nolan continued gathering proof. Marin prepared filings. The forensic accountant traced the missing inheritance funds into a shell LLC linked to a condo deposit under Madison's name. The storage unit contract had been opened using my ID but paid through Ethan's private account. The forged bank authorizations matched email timestamps from nights Ethan had claimed I was too medicated to remember signing paperwork. My independent psychiatric evaluation came back clean and firm: anxiety related to trauma, no cognitive impairment, no incompetence, no indication that I was unable to manage financial or legal affairs. For the first time in 2 years, a professional document described me as capable. I cried when I read that part. Not dramatically. Quietly. Because after months of being treated like a broken object, seeing my own competence written in plain language felt like being handed my name back. Then, 3 nights before the gala, Madison made the final mistake. She left her tablet in my kitchen. Maybe it was arrogance. Maybe she thought I was still too passive to look. Maybe she wanted me to find something small and react badly so they could use it against me. I don't know. But when I saw it sitting beside her purse, unlocked, glowing with an open message thread, I didn't hesitate. The conversation was with Ethan. "Madison, after the gala, we push harder." "Ethan, I don't want a scene." "Madison, then don't make one. You talk to Marin first." "Ethan, Olivia's attorney?" "Madison, if we frame it as concern, she'll listen. We need Liv to agree to temporary financial oversight before she gets suspicious." "Ethan, and if she refuses?" "Madison, then we use the medical history. The panic attacks. The accident. Her mother already believes half of it." "Ethan, Madison. Madison, stop acting like you didn't choose this. You said yourself she was easier when scared." There were more messages below. I scrolled with my hand steady now because the shaking version of me had burned away somewhere back in that storage unit. Then I saw the line that sealed everything. "Madison, once the divorce starts, she can keep the broken girl routine. I'll take the life she was wasting." I took photos. Sent them to Marin. Put the tablet back exactly where it had been. When Madison returned from the bathroom, she smiled like nothing had happened and asked if I wanted tea. I said yes. She made it in my kitchen, wearing my cardigan again, humming softly while Ethan texted her from upstairs. I watched the steam rise from the mug she handed me and wondered how many times she had imagined this. Her body in my kitchen. Her clothes in my closet. Her name on my assets. Her hand in my husband's. Me somewhere far away, dismissed as unstable, dramatic, unwell. But she had miscalculated one thing. She thought trauma made me weak. She forgot trauma also teaches you how to survive quietly. At the gala, I would not scream. I would not slap anyone. I would not collapse and give them the performance they had been preparing everyone to expect. I would stand in front of every person they had lied to. And I would let the truth ruin them for me. The night of the gala, Ethan helped me zip my dress like a husband preparing to celebrate 10 years of love. His hands were steady. Mine were too. That surprised me. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways, and in every version I was shaking, crying, barely able to breathe. But when he stood behind me in the bedroom mirror, smiling softly as he fastened the clasp at the back of my neck, I felt almost peaceful. Not because I had forgiven him. Not because I was numb. Because for the first time in 2 years, I knew exactly what was real. "You look beautiful," he said. I looked at his reflection. "Thank you." He kissed my shoulder. Once, I might have leaned into it. That night, I watched him perform affection like an actor repeating a scene he had already filmed too many times. Downstairs, Madison arrived in a champagne silk dress that looked painfully close to one I owned. She hugged me carefully, her perfume brushing against my cheek, that same vanilla jasmine scent she had stolen from my bathroom and somehow from my life. "You're doing so well," she whispered. "I'm proud of you." I almost smiled at that. Proud. Like I was a child who had managed not to embarrass herself. The ballroom was already full when we arrived. Warm lights, white flowers, champagne trays, donors laughing politely, photographers moving between tables. People came up to me all evening saying how wonderful it was to see me back on my feet. Some squeezed my hands too tightly. Some lowered their voices when asking how I was feeling. I understood then how well Madison and Ethan had prepared the room. Before I even said a word, half these people had already been taught to see me as fragile. Good. That would make what came next impossible to dismiss. For the first hour, I played my role perfectly. I thanked donors. I laughed with clients. I let Ethan place his hand on my waist for photos. I let Madison hover near me like the devoted sister everyone believed she was. Across the room, Marin stood in a black suit near the bar, calm as a blade. Nolan sat at a back table with 2 people from the forensic accounting firm. No one noticed them. That was the point. Then the speeches began. Ethan went first because of course he did. He walked onto the small stage, lifted his glass, and told the room that marriage was not about loving someone when life was easy, but choosing them again when everything became hard. People smiled. Someone actually sighed. Madison lowered her eyes like she was moved. I watched my husband speak about loyalty while the police waited outside with a financial crimes detective and a folder full of documents bearing my forged signature. Then Ethan turned toward me. "Olivia," he said, voice thick with emotion, "you have survived more than most people will ever understand. And I am honored every day to be the person you trust most." That was my cue. I stood before he could continue. The room applauded softly, assuming I was going to cry into his arms. Instead, I walked to the stage, took the microphone from him, and smiled. "You're right, Ethan," I said. "Trust is exactly what tonight is about." His smile faltered. Only slightly. Madison noticed first. She always did. I turned toward the screen behind us. "Before we continue celebrating my marriage, I want to thank the people who helped me understand what my marriage actually was." The first image appeared. A bank authorization form with my forged signature. The room went quiet. Ethan whispered, "Olivia." I kept going. This document was used to withdraw money from my inheritance account. Money my father left me before he died. I did not sign it. Another slide. Another withdrawal. Another signature. Then the storage unit contract. Then photos of my belongings packed away beside Madison's boxes. A murmur began moving through the ballroom like wind before a storm. Madison stood abruptly. "Liv, what are you doing?" I looked at her. "Showing everyone how supportive you've been." Then I played the first audio clip. Madison's voice filled the room, clear and sharp. "She's easier when scared." A woman gasped near the front table. Ethan's face lost all color. The next clip played before either of them could move. "Ethan, I know. I hate that it works, but it works." My mother stood up so fast her chair nearly fell backward. "What is this?" I looked at her, and for the first time all night, my voice almost broke. "This is what they were saying while telling you I was unstable." Madison started crying immediately. Not silently. Not honestly. Loudly, with both hands over her mouth, the way she had cried her whole life whenever consequence entered the room. "That's taken out of context," she sobbed. "She's confused. She's been confused for months." Marin stepped forward then. "No, she hasn't." Every head turned. Marin introduced herself as my attorney, then calmly stated that I had undergone an independent psychiatric evaluation confirming I was fully competent to manage my legal and financial affairs. Then she mentioned the forensic review. Then the forged documents. Then the shell company tied to Madison's condo deposit. Madison stopped crying. That was how I knew fear had finally become real. Ethan moved toward me. "Liv, please. Not here." "Where would you prefer?" I asked. "At home? In the kitchen where she wears my clothes? In the storage unit where you packed away my life? Or maybe in court, where you were planning to tell people I couldn't think clearly?" The room was dead silent now. I clicked once more. The text exchange about my car appeared on the screen. "Don't tell her about the car right now. After the presentation. You know how she gets." My mother made a sound I had never heard before. Ethan closed his eyes. Madison shook her head slowly, backing away as if distance could separate her from the words. "You knew?" I asked him, even though we both knew the answer. "You knew my brakes needed repair before the accident?" Ethan looked shattered, but not with guilt. With exposure. "I didn't think." "No," I interrupted. "You didn't." Then the ballroom doors opened. 3 police officers walked in. That was when the entire room changed. People stepped back from Ethan like betrayal was contagious. Madison grabbed his arm, whispering something fast, but he yanked away from her so hard she stumbled. "You told me to wait," he snapped. Madison's face twisted. "Don't you dare put this on me." And there it was. Their love story ended exactly the way it had been built. Not with loyalty. Not with sacrifice. With blame. The officers reached Ethan first. One asked him to step aside. Another spoke quietly to Madison. She started sobbing again, but softer this time, because nobody rushed to comfort her. My mother stood frozen across the room, one hand pressed to her chest, looking at my sister like she no longer recognized the child she had raised. Ethan looked at me as the officer turned him around. "Olivia," he said, "I loved you." For the first time all night, I laughed. Just once. Quietly. "No, Ethan. You loved being trusted." They took him out through the same ballroom doors he had entered through, smiling. Madison tried to follow, but Marin stopped her with one sentence: "You'll want counsel before you say anything else." By midnight, the gala was over. The flowers were still perfect. The champagne still cold. The floor still shining beneath the lights like nothing terrible had happened there. But my marriage was gone. My sister was gone. The version of myself they had tried to bury was gone too. The next morning, I changed every lock on my house. I closed the storage unit. I moved my award back into my office. And for the first time since the accident, I drove myself 3 blocks in the rain. I was terrified. But I did it anyway. So tell me honestly. Who betrayed me more? The husband who used my trust, or the sister who tried to become me? And if you found out the people closest to you had been building a case against your sanity, would you expose them publicly, or disappear quietly and let karma take its time?